All right, guys. So I don't expect this video to take a lot of time, but I did anticipate that we wouldn't have enough time to kind of finish these notes in class. And I think there's some important stuff to talk about. I can't guarantee everything I'm going to talk about is going to be on the A push exam. Um, and I'm not here to suggest that the purpose of fighting in World War II was surrounding the Nazi Holocaust. But that's certainly going to make up a good portion of our lecture in the next like 15 minutes here, okay? With some film clips attached. Um, so let's get going here a little bit, all right? It is important to note that when the United States is drawn into World War II, that the primary focus is on what we'll call the European theater as opposed to the Pacific theater, which we'll talk about in part in our next class. Um, the Soviets, of course, are kind of allied on the right side, if you will, with the United States. They seek to stop the German advance going any further. And the Allied powers, that would be to say the United States, Great Britain, France, okay, they focus first on North Africa into Italy. But all of that is part of the European theater. We're going to talk a little bit about D-Day, okay? June 4 or June 6, 1944. Okay, and of course, one of the big takeaways for a push curriculum, right, is the causes of and the consequences of the results of war. And in large part, we're going to be talking about things like the creation of the United Nations. Once again, the United States taking an increased role in terms of our prominence on the world stage. Um, that the United States is certainly to be seen as, one of the big three, a world superpower here. Um, and of course, we're going to see Germany once again kind of fall into decline. Really, what we see as a result of Germany being split is the start of the Cold War. And that's a little bit of setting up contextualization for getting into time period 8. Okay, so 1945 up until 1980 is really all about the Cold War, which is certainly, I think, easily hallmarked by the space race and the nuclear arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union. In this battle that is manifested in those regards, but also really an ideological battle, right, between democracy and capitalism and communism and socialism. And so the Cold War, in essence, is going to be the single largest consequence that comes to us as a result of World War II. And the United States, of course, taking a preeminent lead in this new United Nations world. Okay. So, having said all that, and knowing that we're going to return to all that after we talk about the Pacific Theater in our next class, um, the the most powerful portion or the most uh, emotional piece of the European theater that we want to talk about today is the Nazi Holocaust. Okay, and so I want to lay that out for us a little bit, and we talked about it in class live when we already know what this is, and we wanted to analyze through some primary and secondary sources. What did America know and when? Um, and I think we will see today, and that secondary source made the argument, knowing about it is probably a different ball of wax than really kind of understanding it. And I think we'll see that borne out when we watch a clip later on interspersed into today's lecture here from the HBO series Band of Brothers, right? Knowing about it and really understanding it, understanding the imagery are two different things. Um, The word Holocaust comes from the Greek word holocauston, meaning literally sacrifice by fire. Um, Hitler's Third Reich Nazi regime targeted not only Jews, but gypsies, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, the disabled, and anyone who resisted the Third Reich. This was certainly part of this notion of the true power of the Aryan race, right? And the Holocaust was the final solution to eliminate those less than. Certainly, the largest target being Jews in Germany and Poland in particular, but ultimately the plan was for kind of a worldwide domination here. And as a result, 11 million people were killed during the Holocaust, 6 million of them Jews. Um, Almost two-thirds, estimates tell us, of all Jews living in Europe were slaughtered during the Nazi Holocaust. 1.1 million children died in the Holocaust. Um, and I think from an historical perspective, we want to take note that this isn't just kind of like a switch that is flipped, and all of a sudden we're talking about gas chambers and public executions. Um, but we did set up Hitler's rise to power uh, through gradual means. And the same can be said about the escalation of Jewish persecution um, and genocide during this time. Um, the largest impact, right, of World War One is essentially the creation of World War Two. That Hitler rises to power during a time when there's a power vacuum in Germany. Remember, Germany was the largest loser of World War One. Their economy had gone into a tailspin. That nationalism that helped serve as a cause of World War One had been wiped out with the German losses in World War One, and so Hitler rises to power, promising that he and only he can restore not only the German economy but pride to the German people. He's going to build the economy back. He's going to build this sense of nationalism back. And one of the aspects of Hitler's rise um, is that he's blaming others for the fall of the German people and the fall of Germany as a nation itself. And in fact, he blames German Jews. And so he starts to put into place, as I think we see in the documents we analyzed, boycotts of Jewish owned businesses. And then they put into place in September of 1935 what's known as the Nuremberg Laws, which begin to exclude Jews from public life. They strip German Jews of their national citizenship. They put into place restrictions on who Jews can and cannot marry and who can marry Jews. Essentially, no one. There's no extramarital sex between Jews and Germans, no relationships allowed between Jews and other non Jewish Germans. So there's a clear legal distinction made and precedent for dehumanizing on a legal basis the Jewish people. Um, and that kind of escalates slowly, right? But will not culminate, but will kind of elevate when we get to November 9 and 10 of 1938, the incident known as Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. Where now, kind of with the dehumanization and the legal status less than right of the Jewish people firmly in place, it's only a small step to get to violence, and Kristallnacht represents that violence. It's hallmarked by the pillaging and the burning of synagogues, storefront windows of those Jewish businesses that had been boycotted, right? Literally broken glass. Um, the stores are looted. The Jews are rounded up, about 30,000 Jews rounded up over 48 hours here, and they're sent to concentration camps. They are forced to wear the yellow Star of David from this point on to identify them as Jews, and therefore clearly belonging to this group that not only is now less than on a legal basis, but clearly now also subject to violence. And they're forced to live in ghettos. So ghettos, we think of, as a word today to kind of mean like a rough area town, right? The hood. Literally, the modern birth of the word ghetto comes to us from the Holocaust, where the Jews are forced to live in excluded, locked down neighborhoods, and they're trapped within the confines of their ghetto. They're not allowed to leave. And now they're rounded up. So to be sent to a concentration camp, or perhaps worse yet, a death camp, um, the Jews are easily distinguishable, right? Located, and here we go. And once we have Kristallnacht, and we have the Yellow Star of David, and we have the creation of these segregated ghettos, now we see it's yet another fairly simple step. Um, right, violence is already allowed to get into the final solution, extermination. Um, and there are some uprisings. Okay, Jewish resistance fighters. In particular, we know the story of the Warsaw Ghetto. Um, but ultimately, now there's no question about who is in power in Germany and who controls the military. And so, valiant as some fights may be, it's simply too late by this point. And so, throughout Germany and Poland, uh, Jews are sent to both concentration and death camps. And we should understand that there's a difference between the two. Concentration camps um, are different from the death camps or the extermination camps, in that the concentration camps are meant to provide essentially slave labor to support the efforts of Hitler's army. So, in the concentration camps, the Jews are simply worked to death. They are, uh, constructing uniforms, or farming foodstuffs, or packaged goods, or serving all of these civilian war efforts that we talked about in class that are being fulfilled in large part in America by women in the labor force, or we'll talk about African Americans and other minorities in the labor force in our next class. Because wartime, right? Remember, is typically, whether we like it or not, serves as a boon to an economy. All of those roles here are filled by slave labor. Okay, and they're, as I said, they're worked to the death. And if they try to engage in any form of protest or work slowdowns, they're simply executed. So the Jews have no choice but to fulfill this work, or die. Um, Other Jews who are sent to the death camps, they have no choice. Okay, so there are camps where and we're going to talk about perhaps most famously Auschwitz, are not labor camps but just death camps, the gas chambers, where Jews are sent not to work but to be executed immediately upon their arrival. And what we have, right, is I think inarguably the darkest tale in uh, modern world history. We gave out, some of those numbers earlier, but numbers don't really, I think, tell the story. Imagery does, and some of the imagery from the Holocaust is nearly impossible to deal with. If any of you all have been to the Holocaust Museum, you probably walked out of there a little bit shaken. I know I left in tears. It's unbelievable stuff. If you haven't been, what I just said was actually an endorsement for going to get shaken like that. It's an unbelievable tale and a warning for future generations about the worst of humanity, and I would highly recommend making the trip and kind of paying that homage. Um, so unfortunately, as we saw in our analysis earlier, um, it's not just that imagery, right? That draws America into war. Um, it's the fact that we were drawn into war by having been attacked at Pearl Harbor, right? Um, Nevertheless, what becomes known as the Greatest Generation gets very much involved in putting an end to the Nazi Holocaust um, through our military efforts and, quite frankly, unbelievable heroic efforts. One of the most incredible stories that we know of that we um, probably offer some level of glamour to, right, in our textbooks and certainly in film is what's known as D-Day, simply June 6, 1944. The D in D-Day simply denotes an important military operation. It's come to be right, that D-Day in America is synonymous with June 6, 44. Um, and that brings us to the storming and the storming of Normandy Beach and the Battle of Normandy in June through August 1944, which results in the Allied liberation of Western Europe from Nazi Germany control. Um, 156,000 American, British, and Canadian forces land on 5 miles of beach of German controlled, heavily fortified coast in France. The largest amphibious military assault in world history. And it was uh, it's unbelievable that and again, when we talk about heavily fortified under German control, uh, these soldiers understand what they're sailing into, and yet they have to go ahead and take the beach, although they're incredibly outgunned, outmanned, and um, incredibly vulnerable. I might have been misspeaking when I say outmanned because the forces are so large here, but they need to be in order to overcome the other disadvantages at play here in terms of their being outgunned and vulnerable. If you click on this link here, this is, I actually forget offhand if this is from the Band of Brothers or from Saving Private Ryan. But it's a pretty warning, fairly graphic depiction of what D-Day probably looked and felt like. But it's worth your time to go ahead and check that out and then come back to this video, please. So now that D-Day is behind us, and as I said, that's like the assault, right? That removes the Nazi regime from holding all the power cards in Western Europe. We move on to understand um, the liberation of the concentration and death camps, in large part. Um, Operations undertaken by American troops. The camps are liberated by the Allied forces throughout the years 1944, 1945. Auschwitz in January of 45, Dachau in April of 1945. And what's amazing to me when kind of considering these scenes is, again, even, and we go back to when we did that document analysis exercise, um, kind of intellectually understanding what was happening is incredibly different from viscerally understanding what the Holocaust looked and felt like. And especially by the soldiers, we talk about foot soldiers win wars, right? And American foot soldiers, oftentimes, guys, young men not too much older than yourself, may have heard a little bit about the concentration camps or the death camps, but really probably had no visceral understanding, like just could not imagine um, what was really taking place. And if you click on this link here, I think there's a really good scene, probably giving that uh, some sense of justice, of what it must have looked like and felt like for essentially, American teenagers, or, we're talking about guys that are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, um, coming in and witnessing now first time, um, what was happening in uh, Hitler's Germany and Hitler's Poland. And so I want you now to, I think I got about 6 minutes here from the film, or from the miniseries, HBO miniseries, I should say, Band of Brothers. So I want you to check that out and come back, and we'll wrap up soon enough. So it's shortly after that that we get to what we call VE Day, Victory in Europe. Again, the war is not over, okay, because there are two major theaters here, Europe and the Pacific Theater, right, with Japan being the Axis power in the Pacific Theater. But victory in Europe is huge, and it's kind of a foregone conclusion once the Allied forces are victorious on the beaches of Normandy. Although, as we see, it may be a foregone conclusion, but it wasn't quite done yet, and we get to see that with uh, you know, Nazi Germany on the run, and the abandonment of death camps and so on. But victory has been achieved by the time the calendar reaches May 8, 1945. Victory has been achieved in Europe. Okay. Um, a really amazing story. Uh, it's not the end of the tale for World War II. We still need to address the Pacific Theater. We're going to do that next time in class, and we're going to combine the end of the war VJ, Victory over Japan Day, along with, like we did today, some more understanding of the American home front. And we're going to look in particular, like we looked at women in today's class live, we're going to look at racial minorities in our next class live. So, I'll see you in class for that. Thanks, guys. Take care.